So Jesus said to those who believed in him, "If you obey my teaching, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:31 through 32. Thank you for listening to the second episode of Apocrypha Talks. This is your host, Bradley. This show will focus on the Testament of Solomon and the truth it reveals and the nature of truth itself. The Testament of Solomon is a pseudegraphical book, so it's not actual a apocryphal book, so it's pseudegraphical, which means that it is authored by somebody who says they're somebody they're not. So, for instance, the Testament of Solomon is supposed to be written by King Solomon himself, but many historical and biblical scholars believe that to be not true. But the question I want everyone to keep in mind today for this show is whether that's relevant or not compared to the other books of the Bible. More heresy. Well, the Testament of Solomon is supposedly dated within the first millennium of the Common Era. So it's more than likely published around the 4th century. And so, what is the Testament of Solomon? So let me give you a little rundown about the story of the Testament of Solomon. So, this is supposed to be going on during the time that King Solomon is building the first temple. And one of his favorite workers, a young man, I wouldn't say any older than probably 13, 14, maybe 15, is bothered by this demon Ornius. And specifically to me, as a magician and someone who studies the supernatural, I look at the situation that this boy was going through with Ornius, and this is a clear, perfect example of spiritual oppression. You know, what happens before before a demon tries to possess someone. So, whenever a demon tries to possess someone, they will oppress them. They will basically emotionally lock them down and put them in a place where they can't breathe, where they can't eat, sleep without the demon's consent. And it's torture. It's literal torture. And so this boy is so traumatized by, this interaction with this demon Ornius that he's literally sucking his right thumb and acting in improper manners around the temple. And so Solomon is like, "Hey, what's going on? Why are why are you so bothered?" And he tells Solomon it's this demon Ornius. Well, King Solomon, being the wise king he was, he decided to pray to God. And he said, "Lord, give me something, give me the ability to stop this oppression." Okay? And, so God comes down in the manner of Archangel Michael. God gives Michael this ring. And on this ring is what they call in the Book of Solomon, the Testament of Solomon, a pent alpha. A pent alpha. Given to him by the Most High of Heavenly Host. Lord of the Heavenly Host. Lord Sabaoth. I believe that's what it says. So, Solomon tells this boy to take the ring and cast it at Orneus, and to tell him that King Solomon tells him to come by the order of God. And so Orneus is bound to the ring, gives it back to King Solomon, and King Solomon praises God, and you know, and gives thanks to him, and says, and plus he put the power of the ring in the name of God. You see, like he bound the demon in the name of God. He told the boy to do this. And so this is really key because of what I'm later about to, talk about. So he praises God, and he fetches Beelzebub, and Beelzebub, fetches other demons, and and more demons are called. But through the nature of the archangels that they're bothered by, and the name of God. Again, this is key. This is very key to what this book is trying to teach. Okay, so King Solomon, he pleases God in this manner, but then King Solomon wants to take a wife. Once he builds up this temple, everything's, great. They go through some things. And King Solomon's like, you know what, I want to take a wife. And so he takes a wife. He wants to take a wife who's a Moloch worshiper. And from the land that she comes from, they tell him that he cannot take her unless he pledges his allegiance to Moloch, which is totally out of bounds of Mosaic law at the time. I would say it's against bounds now, but it happens. And if you if you want forgiveness from Jesus and you ask for it, then it'll be given to you. But it has to be sincere, of course. Well, anyway, so to take the wife, he has to, give his allegiance to Moloch, in which he does. And this is what messes up his magical covenant with God, because he decides to worship another god. One of the hugest things, one of the biggest things that Moses came down from Mount Sinai and talked about. It's the very first commandment. And Solomon, even though he's so wise, I guess his human nature just took over. But the interesting thing about it is that historically we can look back in the past and see that it was true that Moloch was worshipped alongside with Yahweh in the in the temple. Not saying this is right, but this is what actually happened. And so we see this true historical connection to the Testament Solomon. Of course, when this was written, this is probably well known within the temple. Who knows? But by this time, the temple has already been destroyed by 500 or more years. Of course, they could have kept documents way better. Of course, many, entities want to keep documents from us. But that's the whole point of this podcast, is to reveal the books that they want to keep from us and the truth that they want to keep from us. But let's continue on. And so, they worshipped Yahweh and Moloch alongside each other, which was completely wrong and the reason why the first temple came down. And why Nebuchadnezzar was able to take over. And this is why this book is important, because it shows the differentiation. He was able to summon demons and everything through God and angels, and all sorts of manners, with no problem whatsoever. It did not displease God. He was actually given the power to him by God. So, what? Why is it such a big deal that magic be practiced alongside with Christianity? There is no problem, really. It's just the fact that they're trying to take away a source of power from us. Trying to make us, extreme pacifists. But that's the problem. Life is not about extremism. That's why, in the Tree of Sephiroth, that you always cross paths. You always cross through the left-hand path. You always cross through the middle path and the right-hand path. Life is vicarious that way. But the redemption of that is always the blood of Jesus Christ. So, anyway, another thing that this book, makes one think about and reveals is the nature of the Deuteronomical books, the Deuterocanonical books, sorry, and who wrote them, and, how was it compiled, and you see that most of the books, all the Gospels, almost all the Gospels and all the Acts are completely anonymous, written anonymously. Except for the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is supposedly written by the disciple who Jesus loved, which, is probably John. But the thing about it, too, is that a lot of these books are dated far apart from each other and, not written together. But you can see that they were compiled one after the other. I forgot which one was the latest book. But another thing is that you have to see the relevance of the Testament of Solomon when it comes to looking at Matthew 12:22 through 42. That's whenever Jesus is approached by the Pharisees and he's casting out demons, and they tell him that he's casting out demons in the name of Beelzebub, which is completely false. Completely false. You have to look at that, and it connects completely with the Testament of Solomon, because the thing he says at the very end at Matthew 12:42. Please look that up. That's so important. But yeah, I got to end the show because I'm running out of time, and I'm not paying for this app to make this podcast yet. But I will be looking forward to and putting more money towards creating this podcast. But what I need, a lot of my people who are listening to the show, to start sharing this podcast, and start looking at my blog. Remember, my blog is at Magi Ordo in Ecclesia Pia Christe .tumblr.com. Again, that's Magi Ordo in Ecclesia Pia Christe .tumblr.com. You can also find me on Twitter at vcormag. And remember, everyone, that the Lord said, "This is my commandment, love each other in the same way I have loved you." John 15:12. Go in peace, everyone.